Hello and welcome to the Overly Animated Podcast, where we take animation seriously. I'm Beatriz Mourad, and today I'm joined by Melanie Moyer.
Hello.
And April Collins.
Hi.
So, 14 years. We have waited 14 years for this movie, and it is finally here. The Incredibles 2 came out this week. We've all seen it. We're going to talk about it, so get ready. If you haven't seen The Incredibles 2, we will be having a brief non-spoiler discussion to start us off. But warning, this is mainly a spoiler podcast. I will let you know when the spoilers begin, so be mindful of that announcement. You can find out more about this podcast at overlyanimated.com. You can subscribe to us on iTunes at overlyanimated.com/iTunes, where we appreciate your star ratings, or search for Overly Animated on your favorite podcatcher. So, guys, to start us off, just very briefly, answer me this one question. Did you like the movie, and was it worth the wait? April, let's start with you.
I did like the movie, and given, I guess, sort of the whole package as it is, I think it was worth the wait. It could have been really, really bad, and it wasn't. So I guess I'm very, I was hype on the movie before it came in. I've seen it twice already.
Okay,
so.
cool.
Oh, wow.
Cool. All right, you've seen it the most, then, I'm assuming.
I'm gonna guess.
I've seen it once. So
I've seen
yeah.
it once. Okay.
I am
yes.
actually going to see it again tonight, though, after this.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, cool. Mel, what about you?
Yes, I enjoyed it. Was it worth the wait? I think it was, just because I would have, it's The Incredibles. Since 2005, I've been waiting for this movie. Even if it had sucked, I would have still been like, yes, this happened. I was really happy it didn't suck, though.
Good.
Me too.
My big fear. That was my big fear, is that it was going to be complete garbage, and it was not.
Yeah, that's
But
always a big fear.
I was going to say, I probably would have enjoyed it even if it was garbage. I would have been like, this is the best.
Gotcha.
I do like that they open the movie with the apology.
Yeah, they
Yes.
do.
They were like-
do.
The
I thought
entire
that was
cast
nice.
comes out and they're like, sorry.
They're like, my bad. We know, we feel your pain. But yeah, I very quickly want to just say, because I was on the reaction podcast that was released online on Thursday night when the movie came out. I started, if anyone actually listened to it, I started off very happy. And then as the podcast progressed and I actually started thinking more and more about the movie, I got less enthusiastic about it. So at the moment, I'm like, I don't like putting numbers on things, but I'm going to rank it 6.57 out of 10 for me. So it's not as great as I thought it was initially. And hopefully it'll stay that way, because I'm more, I tend to usually, the more I think about things,
This sucks.
the more, that's the thing. It's either the more I think about it, the more I love it more, or the more I think about it, the more I dislike it more. So
That's what was me with Last Jedi, so.
yeah. In what way? Like more or hate more?
Hate more.
Gotcha.
The more I thought about it, the more I was like, this was terrible.
Gotcha.
Yes, those are my feelings too, which is why I haven't watched it again, because I just know in my heart.
But sometimes the opposite can happen, though, right? Totally, I could go back and watch it tonight and be like, here's all the things that I was just being a brat about. This was actually a good movie. So,
Well,
it's happened.
I was going to say also, because the first time I watched it, I had a really bad movie going experience too. And so whenever I came out of the movie, I was like, yeah, it looked really nice. But I was like, but I mean, that was it. And then when I watched it the second time, I guess, and I got to actually enjoy it, I was like, okay, this is great. I'm really enjoying this. This is fun for me. The parts that and I'm sure we'll talk about them, that sort of lose me, don't subtract from the movie so much so that I'm like, no, this is still a terrible movie.
Right.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Before we get into the spoiler stuff, before we get into the juicy spoilers, is there anything in particular that you guys want to mention that stood out to you? Anything good or bad? Any hot takes coming out of this movie that you want, say, if there's a listener that is on the fence about whether or not they want to see it, what would you say? Is there anything in particular that stands out?
Well, so two things that have nothing to do with each other whatsoever. The first thing you say, to somebody who hasn't seen it yet and they're trying to decide to see it, One thing I would say, and I saw this going around the internet a little bit, that it is like, if you are somebody who has epilepsy issues of any sort, like you need to, like, this is not, I mean, like, just know that there are parts in this movie that are very, very, like, it's huge light stimuli. Like, you can see in the trailer too, like the hypnosis stuff, like that's like, it gets very in your face at certain points. So if you are somebody who is like, I have migraines that are triggered by, basically light stimuli. I didn't really have a problem here, but somebody who's got it a lot worse could have a pretty bad time. So just know that going in, and, you know, it doesn't get too bad until about halfway through the movie. Something that has nothing to do with that whatsoever. So is it that, like, Jack has 1 million powers, or is that he's still trying to find his power? That's just like my general question in the ether, because there's a couple different articles saying different things and nobody can come to a consensus on it. So
I read something interesting. Like, I think it was it Brad Bird who said that it's, again, we know that he has multiple powers, but he was talking about how it's like, you know how babies can, like, learn languages very quickly? Mm-hmm. So he was talking about, like, that's why Jack is able to have multiple things and that are very different, multiple powers that are very different from each other. So I'm like, maybe, I don't know.
I'm thinking of one line that somebody says in the movie that we'll talk about in the spoiler section, I guess. But there's somebody that a character says that makes me think, like, I don't know. I don't buy Brad Bird's
answer. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. April, what about you? Any, like, hot takes, anything in particular that you want people to know before we move on?
First off, the animation is beautiful.
Beautiful.
But what's really enjoyable is that, like, you can definitely see, like, that the animation and, like, it's just visually stunning. But you don't, like, lose the sort of original, like, feel from the first movie. So if you want to look at something very, very pretty, this movie is definitely worth it. Like, there were a lot of scenes where I was just like, no, they probably took a camera and went outside and, like, filmed this, because that's what it looked like to me. And then they just sort of, like, imposed it onto the rest of the movie. They just edited it in. But I will say that there's one character who I was kind of hoping for, like, some character development on, that we just didn't get, and I won't say who it was.
That could be anybody.
That could be anyone, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So there was like one character who I was kind of hoping that we would get a little bit more from them, but we didn't. And then for me, because one of the things I loved about the first movie was the music, and I felt like the music was it was good, don't get me wrong, but it was a little bit, like, subpar compared to the first movie, in my opinion.
Subpar.
Gotcha.
Subpar.
I was making a pun.
I know. I knew what I said.
That's good.
I said what I meant.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like, I made a note saying that the music was still great, but now that you mention it, it's like, well, yeah, but it wasn't as present in this film as it was in the first one. The first one, it was its own.
The dun dun dun, like, you don't get that theme
as often,
motif.
Yeah. You get it in the beginning, but
there was, like, one scene too where the music just I think I have it written down. I'll have to check my notes. But there was, like, one scene, and I was just like, this music is not right for this scene, and I did not like it.
Gotcha. Okay.
It's the wrong tone.
The wrong tone.
Okay. Gotcha. I will agree. It is definitely a beautiful movie, and that's the most striking thing. It's like, I kind of want them to just, like, you know how some video games do, like, the HD remake of the video game? So they'll it's the same video game, it just looks prettier. I kind of want them to do that with the original Incredibles, where they don't change a thing. They just up the animation a bit, because that's how pretty Incredibles 2 looks. It's just so stunning. Yeah. And having seen the first one recently, it's like, oh wow, animation has really come far. In just this kind of
2005 was a wacky year.
Yeah. I mean, but it's just like, it's crazy how, Jake, in 14 years, how drastic the shift has been, you know? So it's kind of like, it's stunning film to look at. But, all right, so now let's get into spoilers. This is spoilers. Go away.
Yay.
Everyone dies. Everyone dies.
Yep, that's it. That's the spoiler.
These kids were just screaming in my theater. It was horrific.
Okay, before anything, April, what was that? What was the scene? What was the scene where the music just didn't match?
Oh, it was, dang it. I can't even, I couldn't find it in my notes. I thought I wrote it down. I've been like flipping the pages like very
I'm trying
quietly.
to think too, like to myself, I'm like, what did I feel like something didn't match somewhere?
It was towards the end of the movie. I'm hoping like my memory will jog, but it wasn't so much that there was like a fight going on, but it had like that very like da 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 da, and I was like, no, why do we have this music?
And like somebody was like getting groceries or something.
Yeah, like it was very like out of place for me. Oh man, I wish I could remember which scene it was now, and
I'll be on the lookout for that tonight.
Yeah,
when I go back.
Gotcha.
Report back.
Maybe I'll go in the Discord and for the first time and
yes,
there. But I found it.
But yeah. So let's dive into this. So we basically start off Incredibles 2 like the moment the first one ends, and we see them take on the Underminer with this like great opening sequence. It's in terms of just like how it sets up our two main stories. It's similar to the first movie. Obviously, the introduction in the first Incredibles is superior in every shape and every way. And it does so much in terms of world building and all this stuff, and it's so graceful in the way it does it. Point is, it's not when I say the similar, I mean just in terms of like, okay, this opening like plants the seeds needed to kind of split us off and take us into these two big plot stories that we have. The main plot, which is with Elastigirl, and then the B plot, which is with Bob and the kids. So that's kind of how I'm going to break down this podcast. But before we start diving into specifics, something that really stayed with me from the previous podcast on this movie was this kind of discussion about these like lack of themes in this one. I just feel like in the first Incredibles movie, we had midlife crisis happening with Bob. We had like family. We had like a marriage almost crumbling. Like we had a lot of things happening. And in this one, it was just kind of like action sequence. And then we have this thing happening. And then plot twist. And then boom. You know, it didn't really have that kind of emotional resonance for me that the first one had. And something that really stood out to me in particular with this is that they used illegal as the term to describe superheroes. And that word, and especially for me as
like, where did that come from?
And look, as for me as a Latina, the illegal term has a lot of weight to it, has a lot of meaning and charge to it, especially as of late. So I was very curious about their decision to choose that, and I was very, in a way, kind of annoyed by the fact that they don't really explore that usage. They don't really, they just decide to use it, this knowing full well that this is a very charged word, especially in our current landscape. And it's not like they weren't aware of it, because they make a lot of mentions, like there was this one mention about politicians and a jab at politicians. So it's not like they're not aware of the implications
of what they're saying.
Not what they're saying, but also like they're not ignorant of what's happening around us and the sentiments that are happening in our world. So I was just kind of curious what you guys thought of this kind of, and if you guys also felt this kind of emptiness of feelings.
Yeah, that was my immediate reaction, right? Like the second they said like, oh, like supers are illegal and our kids are technically illegal, I was like, oh, okay, this is gonna be it, right? Like they're totally gonna go for this. And then they drop it, like they don't. Like they say like, oh yeah, supers are like illegal, but like in the shallow first level sense that we're talking about it. Like they basically like cut themselves off at the knees with like the metaphor there and the higher issue. And it wasn't even that the first Incredibles had this higher social issue that it was discussing, but it's like if you're going to be using terms like illegal, especially talking about kids too, even you know, in 2018 or 2018.
4 years ago, 2014 was still happening, which is like giving them that 4-year time frame. Even 4 years ago, it's like it was something happening. So
like, and you're not going to explore that further. Like you're just going to kind of leave it at face value is kind of frustrating. And that's like, it's one of the many things where I felt like this movie did not go far enough, or it kind of like, just like didn't give itself enough to do. Like, I don't know whether it was trying to play it safe or maybe like they just didn't think they had the time to do it or what have you. But like, this is like one of the first things where I was like, okay, yeah, like they're gonna go there with this. They're gonna be discussing how these people are illegal. This isn't exactly, you know, like a new concept in superhero films, but they could just totally give it this spin on it, right? And talk about issues that we have today. And then they didn't. It kind of just goes away pretty easily and pretty immediately.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
April, what about you? Any like themes? Just it doesn't even have to be about the illegal use of that word. It could be just anything. Did you also feel kind of this emptiness of themes in this movie?
Yeah, I did. And I think like it was super, I guess, strange for me. It was because like I guess the like one like minor theme that they were trying to like pick up or like use with the screenslaver like villain was like this whole like oh, like everyone's so attached to their screens and blah 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 blah. And I was like, this is 1960,
right?
Like
or something like that.
There's like something. It's like 1960s. I think it's like 1964 or something like 1963. I can't remember. But like
he was watching Outer Limits.
Yeah, but they were like trying to make this point about screens, and it's like so like minute, but then at the same time it's like, okay, I could like pick up on that more and like understand it more if it was like modern day and they were like, oh, these people are attached to their screens, so I'm going to hypnotize them. But it's like maybe each house has one television, if that. So, but yet you're like trying to make this point of like, oh, like get out and do things. And it wasn't even like that. It was just like, oh, you're all slaves to your screens. And it's like, okay, so what do you want us to do? Want them to do instead? Besides,
in the 1960s.
Like, in the 1960s. Well, like that's the thing though. Like it would be like different if like, I can't even like the screenslaver villain. Because I'm trying to separate like the villain from like the identity. The villain. But like it would be like one thing if like she was like, oh, I want them to like go outside and like play more like when we were kids or whatever. And it's like, no, you didn't even like try and like offer an alternative. You're just like, you're just all going to be slaves to your screens. Haha, that's it. And it's like,
I guess the weird thing is that she equates screens with like their blind sort of trust in the idea of superheroes, which I was like, all right, but wait a minute.
Those aren't the same thing.
It doesn't really track at all.
Like
they're not.
Sorry. No. Because like there could be because as I was like writing this outline, I was thinking like, what is this movie trying to say? I was like, well, there could be this kind of thing about like, for instance, like PR and this kind of like, oh, like if we just need to like, we can like, if we just like frame you guys properly, then we can convince the world that you're okay. And I'm like, so and you're like, are you making this link between like screens and what people see versus like truth? Like, what are you trying to do? But the thing is, they don't really follow through with that. And you know, when like, for instance, when they show that Elastigirl has like cameras all through her suit and stuff, I was like, oh, so are we gonna deal with like privacy and like cameras everywhere and like what are we doing?
Yeah.
Like, because even if it's like sure, like it's the 60s, technically it's set in the 60s. It's not modern day. Even then, it's like all right, but like that's when like TVs became like this big boom, right? That's like when that was more 50s and 60s. Like yeah, it's around that time period. You can still make the argument where like people started having more TVs. So yeah, totally. Like presidential elections during that time were decided by the television debate. So I'm like, I can understand why like they chose screens. I can understand why the importance and why someone would fear that. But the problem is that she doesn't even like make that connection. Like those motivations that you were setting up, like, oh, maybe she's doing this because of this. Like it doesn't even follow through. Like they don't say anything. When dealing with these screens. They just put it there, but then they don't really follow through, which is the same thing with the illegal stuff, which is like they drop these things in, but then they don't actually explore what it is that they're trying to do. I just feel like sometimes this movie doesn't exactly know what it wants to do.
Well, yeah. Well, and the other thing too is I guess like it sounds terrible, and I know in the first movie they, I guess, like make fun of it as like the whole monologuing thing, but then like we understand, but like when a villain monologues, then we understand like what they're trying to accomplish, you know, like, oh, this person is trying to take over the world. Like, oh, this person is trying to destroy all televisions, or like But there was none of that. Like, what were you hoping to accomplish after you, like, made superheroes, like, illegal again? Like, there was no connection.
So that's, like, the weird thing, right? Like, to me, with this, like, I almost felt like they incidentally were making a case for, like, it's weird. It's probably a stretch, but it's like when I saw those, those flashback scenes, and then what's her face? I can't even remember her real name. Evelyn. Yes, Evelyn.
I literally had to just look it up.
I had it in front of me, and I just still didn't know it.
Well, her explanation for everything, and I was thinking about it. I was like, they kind of like accidentally like made something that I was reading as almost like an advocation for the argument to gun control, right? Mm-hmm. Because his house gets broken into, by somebody with a gun, and he has no defense, and he goes to call these superheroes who don't answer, right. And she's mad about this, and she's like, oh, this is terrible, like, this isn't the way to do this, like, clearly he needs a better line of defense. And I was like, I know that's not what they were going for, but because they didn't pick what they were going for, like, it had this vacuum where it was like, immediately that's where my mind went. I was like, I feel like they almost made this argument where that people make all the time, like, these hypotheticals about why people should be allowed to, just own guns and stuff. And I was like, they didn't mean to do it, as far as I can tell, but it that's what happens when you don't, pick a direction that you're pointing to.
Well, I mean, you can also make the argument, because reading it in terms of gun control, you could do kind of, I feel like maybe she focused on the wrong thing. It's like, instead of like wishing for superheroes, maybe superheroes have come to represent the laws and of gun control that we need in order to stop these guns from happening. Mm-hmm. Maybe superheroes are the is it literal or figurative? I can never figure it out. The actual representation.
Those are two opposite words. So
point is, they actually become the metaphor for actual law and justice and whatever. So it's like, by taking them away, you allowed a gun to exist.
Yeah.
So
that reading exists too, for sure. Right. And that's like what I'm saying. I was like, there's so many ways to read this, because you didn't give me enough to tell me the way that you wanted it to be read.
Right. Gotcha. Yeah. Very true. Very true. But okay, let's talk about, since we're on this villain, let's talk about Evelyn and Winston, because he's kind of her counter. First of all, were you guys surprised by Evelyn being the villain? Okay, all right.
No, I actually thought it was Winston, and then when it ended up being Evelyn, I was like, it was going to be one of the two. Like,
no, as soon as she came in, I was like, this girl is shady.
Dropping coffee cups all over the place.
This smirk. She like sits in weird places and like stares at people with her like legs crossed and stuff. And I was like, she's like obviously. And then like when she and Elastigirl had their little heist, I was like, obviously it's her, since they were the only two involved. So
Gotcha.
Yeah. I have thoughts. This is on Mel's list of script doctoring things, is Evelyn and her whole deal.
Give me your thoughts. What are your thoughts?
So this is so the need to like make the villain, like to hide the villain's identity and like make it a surprise, was like a huge like fail, in my opinion here. Like the villain like syndrome works so well in the first one, because as soon as you realize who he is, you're like, oh, like holy, like, oh my God, like it got me when I was a kid. And then it's like, you've got this villain that is the direct result of something Bob did way back when, right? Like he created his own villain. And it's not to say that all villains have to have this, intimate personal connection to superheroes. Because I mean, like, look at Dark Knight Rises, just Dark Knight. Mm-hmm. Well, I guess in Dark Knight Rises too, but specifically Batman and Joker, like they got nothing, but they butt heads so well, right? But in here, it's like, okay, so we've got this villain who is obviously one of those two. I don't know which it is, but it doesn't even matter, because they're basically the same person. So it's one of those two, clearly. And this villain, like there was no consequence to this villain. It was like, oh, okay, it's this chick who doesn't like superheroes and thinks people are are kind of getting lackadaisical about like the way that they go about in their life because the presence of superheroes and this idea of gods coming down to save them and stuff. So I'm going to do something about it. And it's like, okay, great. I understand that. But what does it have to do with, you know, The Incredibles? Like, what does it have to do with this family in particular? Like, yeah, I understand you hate all superheroes, but why do I care about it right now? Right? Like, there's no immediacy to it. It's like this umbrella thing. So it's like, my issues are twofold. It's one, don't hide her identity. Just tell us straight up front. Like, that would have been better. Like, give me some dramatic irony, you know? Like, oh, I know who it is. The movie knows that I know who it is. But the rest of The Incredibles have no idea. So, you know, you're waiting for that penny to drop basically throughout the entire movie. Two, give her a little bit, you know, like, this is supposed to be Elastigirl's movie. So give her the same connection to this villain that Bob got with Syndrome.
Right.
Like, give her more sense in that story. Like, don't just make it, oh, this chick that she's kind of friends with now, but like hates her guts on like a macro level. Like, that, I don't get anything from that.
Yeah. You make good points. And also I think, I don't know, I also found that the actual, like, her strategy wasn't that, like, well concocted. I don't know, I feel like there's, like, much more effective and efficient ways, especially with someone that is as influential as she is. Like, something that bothered me about the film was that they talk about, like, oh, these politicians who are, like, against us, and they refute whatever, blah, blah, blah. And, like, we never see a politician that's against them.
Yeah, like, Hillary Clinton's over there, like, going, you know, like, being the ambassador.
Right. Exactly. And then we get this, like, room full of politicians who are A-okay with it, but we never get the actual people that are, like, I just keep going back to that line that, what's his name? The government agent man person? Dicker. He was like, oh, well, you know, like, politicians, like, they're just a bunch of people who didn't do anything. They don't do anything. They only care for themselves. And I'm like, well, show me one that is actually, like, is against superheroes. And I feel like had there been a split,
like, make them be the villain. You know what I mean?
Or not just that, bro. Like, had Evelyn stayed the villain, but had been from the start, we know that she was a villain, and had it been kind of like a split between, like, her and Winston, and it's like kind of this fight for the dynasty of this, like, company, and it's like, can Winston do it since she's the brains? And then they're both fighting politically in this other thing, like, these political machinations. I feel like, and that could say a lot about, like, and that could, like, comment on these, like, rich people who have so much influence over politicians. Like, they could have done so much, like, interesting stuff, and they kind of don't do that. So I don't know, it's interesting. I agree with you completely.
Yeah. And I think that was one of the big issues that also took away from, like, the emotional pull of this movie. Because, like, the first one was so emotional. You're like, oh my goodness. Like you said, you've got all these things about a guy but, you know, like, a marriage falling apart and, you know, this guy going through a midlife crisis and thinking he's nothing without his superpowers. And then that scene at the end where he just says to Elastigirl, and he's like, oh, I wasn't strong enough. I'm not going to be strong enough for you guys. Yeah. And I was like, oh man, like, that's, like, such a big iconic moment in those movies. And we had nothing like that here because you didn't give any emotional attachment to anything.
No.
And it's something interesting as well is that, I was expecting kind of more exploration of, like, the family dynamics between Evelyn and Winston, since that's such a drastic contrast to the Parr family. Because you only have these two siblings, and they come from a broken family. Their family was, like, one of their members was taken away from them. This is most of the movie I watched with a smile on my face, but there's just this one moment that I just guffawed in just complete ludicrousy, because they showed the Batman origin story. How many times do we have to see this scene happen? Even though it's not Batman, we still saw the Batman origin story.
I'm so sick of that.
And this is more on the camp of, like, maybe Winston should have been the villain, in terms of it could have been interesting, or even just, I guess they kind of did it with Evelyn a little bit, but it could have been really interesting.
But it fell so short. Simply because, like, it fell short because, like, if she's so against what her brother is doing, then why is she going along with it? Like, that didn't make sense to me at all. And it just, it's
yeah, why are you helping him? Like,
exactly. Like, and it's not even so much that like it would have been way more interesting if she was like sabotaging it along the way, but she wasn't. Like, she helped, she like gave it to her brother on like a silver platter, and was like, here you go. And then at the end, she's just like, JK, I'm going to take it all away from you.
She's shocked
like,
that it goes poorly.
Yeah, right? Like, you literally waited to make your move until it already, like, your brother already succeeded. Like, you're trying to, like, take down a, skyscraper with just a tiny hammer? Like, good luck. Enjoy. Like, have fun with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but and then not just on top of that, but it's kind of like I would have really rather preferred them kind of subvert this kind of Batman trope of like, what if instead of, this rich, like successful heir to a tycoon or whatever, if he saw his parent, like his dad die from gun violence and then do the opposite of what Batman did, It's like, if you're gonna show me the Batman origin,
do something about it.
Like, no, like, do the opposite where it's like, even if it's like, oh, like now, like what if he then became the Joker? You know what I mean? Like, that could be interesting too. So I'm just like, I don't know. I'm just like, if you're gonna show me that scene, do something different.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm very sick of seeing the Batman origin story.
But, yeah.
And I didn't even think about it until you said it, and I was like, oh my god, she's Batman. She's a tech-savvy person who had to watch her parents shot by a mugger.
She's like a lesser version of Batman.
She's literally Bruce Wayne. Wow. Which, like, and, I would love it if they had acknowledged that, because they make fun of, like, superhero motifs in the first one. Like, oh, you're monologuing. Like, oh, no capes. Like, capes are awful, and all this stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. Point out that you just gave me, like, female Batman. Like,
Yeah. That would have been awesome. Like, it's after I think about it, I'm like, oh my god, she was female Batman, and this is what we got. I kind of also, there's some similarities between her and Syndrome.
Yeah.
Because, like, they're both geniuses, they're both tech geniuses, and they're both super rich. I feel like maybe that's the reason why they didn't want her to, like, also have her own tech and her own suit or something, because they didn't want too much of a similarity. But then in that case, I'm like, why make her a tech-savvy super genius anyway then?
Yeah.
Make her, like, have like, these hidden powers or something, and she hides them from her brother, and then she reveals them, and then he's like, why didn't you tell me? I would love this. And then she's like, that's not the point. I hate this, and blah. And then you can still tell that story. I don't know. There's just...
That would have been so dramatic and great.
Right?
I know. That would have been wonderful.
No, but, like, my thing is, too, is all that, right? Like, do all that, but at the same time, like, okay, but where's Elastigirl's story in this, right?
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay, great. This is Elastigirl's movie. Like, she's getting her own thing, but we don't get any of it, right? Like we see her, she gets her new suit, she does her thing, but it's like we don't get any. Not that I need like some great mythological backstory, but we got a lot on Bob in the first one, like especially because of his relationship with Syndrome. And what was his name? What was his real name? Something Buddy. I was thinking something dorky. Buddy. Yeah, and like how he treated Buddy when he first met him, all those years ago and stuff. So it's like, okay, like where's Elastigirl's thing? Like where's her deep, dark,
where's like her or like her villain, you know what I mean? Like
this villain is a villain just because she happened, like statistically she was their best bet, so they chose her. Right. And like she kind of had a connection with this woman because they were like the only two women in the 60s doing anything in the skyscraper. So they're like, oh, let's drink Negronis and talk about how stupid our brothers and husbands are, so it's like, OK, like they've got a connection, but it's like, I don't care. Like,
it's not a strong enough connection.
Yeah, and give me Elastigirl. Like, give me more Elastigirl. Give me Elastigirl's backstory. Give me past villains she fought, like past sidekicks she had. Like, why does Bob get so much in the first movie, and then Elastigirl's movie is like basically predicated on, oh, look what happens to Bob because Elastigirl gets to go do this. Like, look, like it's hinges so much on like the effect that it has on Bob, which kind of bugged me too. Like that got more precedence than like, oh, Elastigirl's doing awesome and there's so much to explore here, but we're not gonna.
Okay, well, speaking on that, this is, again, following this kind of trend of kind of missed opportunities or lack of exploration. I was going into this movie, especially after seeing the trailers and knowing that we were going to get a focus on Elastigirl, I was expecting we were going to get much more exploration of this kind of stay-at-home dad versus working mom family dynamic. I mean, there is this lovely scene in the beginning after the Underminer, all that stuff, but before they meet with Winston and Evelyn, there's this lovely scene where she goes, maybe like it's my turn to go off and work. And then Bob says, no, I have to do this. And I'm like, explore that.
Gosh.
Explore these gender norms that you're perpetuating.
Yeah.
They didn't at all. And I was just like, but that's it. That's the story.
Also, she said private sector. Giggle about that.
Yeah, I didn't get that either. But she, that conversation that happens where I can't even imagine how many times there's been a conversation where like the mom goes, let me work this time, and then the dad goes because he feels like because of these societal expectations, feels like no, I have to be the one who works, and and then whatever, you know what I mean? I feel like they could have really explored that, and they didn't, or as much as they should have.
It, like even if they just had said something like, look, I understand you want to be the man of the house, but, it was killing you, so let me do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like where's her rebuttal to that?
Yeah, there was none. And then I think the other thing, too, that really made me, I guess, mad, and maybe I'm, like, veering off topic, was the fact that, like, Bob was only encouraging her to do it so that he could so he could do it later. And I was like, why don't you just encourage her to do it because, like, she's amazing and she's your wife, like...
And support your freaking wife.
Right? Like, I was really upset about that.
Like, I can understand... I there were moments because it was really hard to sympathize with him, but I could understand certain moments where, for instance, he didn't tell her about Jack because he wanted her to keep working. He's like... Yeah. Like, there were moments where he was doing it, but then... There was just this kind of like attitude that came along with it that was just like, why are you ruining this? Don't ruin this, Bob. Come on.
Get it together, Bob.
Well, yeah, get it together, Bob.
But
I was gonna say the other thing too with like what was it, like him like keeping the whole thing about Jack from her. Like I understand, like I guess that motivation, like, oh, you're letting her do her thing or whatever. But it was like, it seemed almost like super reminiscent of like the first movie and how he was keeping all those secrets from her.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of hoping for like that sort of like, I guess the payoff that we got in the first movie where it's like, if you keep these secrets, then like she's going to suspect these things. But it wasn't even like, we didn't even get that. Like that was one of the things that I guess I enjoyed about like the first movie. And I know we talked about it whenever like we had the podcast about the first movie, was that I liked that there was like, they set up and it was like, oh, she wasn't so much jumping to conclusions. She had like, we understood her reasons for how she got there, but it wasn't like, we didn't get any of that. It was like, he literally just kept secrets from her and that was okay. But at the end of the movie, like there was no like, I can't believe you kept the secret from me. Like, how can I trust you? Whatever, anything. There was nothing, like literally nothing.
It's interesting because if anything, it was framed as, I can't believe I missed his first superpower.
Yes.
It's more like I was wrong because I was working instead of, oh, why didn't you tell me so that I wouldn't have to miss it,
Yeah.
Which is, I don't know, there's this one scene in the first Incredibles, it's when they're fighting before he takes off and then she just screams at him, it is not about you. And that's it. We needed that moment again here. And it's like, sucks that we need it again because you'd think that he'd grow from those like very traumatic things that happened in the first movie. But we needed someone to go, it's not about you, just for that brief moment. Like, I get it. He's essentially the Superman of like that world. And if you're Superman, which is a more realistic take than the actual Superman, you'd get a big head. You'd get very cocky and you'd have some egotistical issues that you'd have to work out. But you'd think that after what happened in the first one, that he'd learn that.
It was almost like he regressed, like very badly, like regressed. And then at the same time, like Elastigirl or Helen, she regressed too. Like she fell into like this, like I guess it's like a woman trope, like she how dare she work? She missed these things. Like it's okay, my husband can keep secrets from me. Like just like it's like everything you were trying to do with this movie, you destroyed it in this like single relationship.
and kind of going just to finish at least my thoughts on it. You guys can feel free to add, but I just found it very frustrating how. Like, this could have all made a lot more sense in terms of their regression if they were just, like, actually talking about like societal norms. If they were actually like, oh, because these things are ingrained to us from the moment that we're children, that men have to be this way and women have to be this way. Like, because of that, that's why there might be this like regression in a way. Then they could have had a conversation when they're like, why are we like this? We know that lies are bad. We know that I shouldn't feel this way or whatever. Why is this happening? And then instead of saying like, oh, right. I mean, obviously they wouldn't flat out have like a gender theory, like sermon or something, obviously, but it would be a more graceful way to do it. But that's what they needed to do. And they would make all this regression make sense and have a lot more meaning to it instead of just being like, for the sake of like just laziness for the simplicity of the plot, I guess.
MacGuffin.
Exactly.
Well, and I think the other thing that I guess, makes it worse is so that opening scene with Tony and how
Tony, this is all his fault.
I'm like,
God dang it,
no,
Tony.
because Tony's great because he was like, I have no problems with a strong woman. Like, I'm secure in my masculinity. And I'm like, Tony, yes. Like,
I loved that line. I was like, I thought that's what we were going to get. I was like, oh, this is a great start. Okay, this is where we're going. And then they just don't follow through. And it's really important to follow through. But yeah, okay. So speaking of kind of villains, I will say something positive. We've been pretty hard. Something positive.
Yeah, I was gonna say we don't hate this movie.
No.
I don't hate this movie at all. But
I know.
Here are my issues with it. I'm openly discussing.
This is a good, great movie. It's I watched it with a smile on my face. So let's take a moment to talk about something positive. We need to talk about that train sequence. That train sequence with Elastigirl.
It was stressful.
It was very stressful. Oh my goodness.
But you guys, like the way that they just so creatively used her powers in that.
Yeah.
It was
just when she split the motorcycle over top in the tube. I was like, oh
man, there's this, I don't know. When I saw that, it kind of a little bit reminded me of. I don't know if you guys have seen the Venom trailer.
Yeah.
There's, where he's riding a motorcycle and then he gets flung up and then the Venom just grabs him and brings him back down. I was like, that's so epic. And then I saw it in this movie with Elastigirl doing it, and I was like, this is amazing. And this is just a very strong positive with this movie is seeing how these superheroes use their superpowers. Yeah. And it's so creative. And a lot of times, especially with these with Marvel, for instance, it's a lot of punching. It's a lot of just who has the strongest punch. Yeah. It doesn't get super, super creative. I mean, it gets creative in terms of the fighting sequence, in terms of like, hey, it's a ballet if you do a fist fight right, But at the same time, it's almost always a fist fight. Whereas with here, they got really creative because they're allowed to. They're not limited by live action limits. They can just show they can show Elastigirl doing these crazy things, and it's so fun to watch. That was super entertaining. So I needed to mention that.
Yeah. No, it was great. I really enjoyed it. And to what you said, it was just extremely creative, like the way that they had her use her powers. You know what I mean? Like it could have just been her a lot of like just general stretching, if that makes sense. But no, it was like sort of like the usual stretch, how it is when you're elastic. But it was like kind of like what is it? Like it made her seem so intelligent too. Like the way she sort of like manipulated the physics to like go like to stretch herself out, but then snap herself back up. Like kind of that thing. Like, and I know it's like, I know she did it a lot in the movie, but I really enjoyed every time she would sort of like slingshot herself to get somewhere. Cause I was
like Spider-Man. I was like,
yeah, exactly. That's what it was. It was almost like Spider-Man-esque, and like, it's just like, dang, I never would have thought of that if I was elastic. Like,
I would have tried these powers. It would have been a waste.
Right? Like, these powers would have been useless, like, wasted on me. I would have been like, I need that soda. Like, stretch, grab, it's mine again. Like,
speaking of wastes, I guess, like, I don't know, like, my next point on my list of things that I would have doctored in the script, right, is that they did not give those kids enough to do, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, I have in my outline, #justice for Dash. In the previous podcast, Alex and Dylan were talking about how they really liked that Dash in this one because there was less of him. But by the end of it, I was like, you know what? No, Dash deserves like just as much time as the others. Like he got robbed. He got robbed.
So I was gonna say, so to what I said in the beginning, Dash is the character that I wanted to see something from, and we got nothing.
Yeah,
like it was super disappointing because we got like we obviously got the development of like Helen and Bob and Violet, and then like there was like no development for Dash in the first movie, and I was like, okay, like hopefully in the second movie like we have more room. We've already kind of established these characters, so we can sort of grow Dash a little bit. Nope, didn't grow him at all. He's the exact same, except there was less of him, and it was kind of sad, like because. Like, I thought, like, Violet's, like, character growth was, like, super, like, strong, but then, like, it was literally none. Like, so disappointing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, like, so, like, they open with Tony, right? So I'm like, oh, like, and then he stands her up, and you're like, oh, man, not on purpose, but, like,
yeah.
Like, oh, no, like, this sucks so bad, like, oh, and you don't really go anywhere with it. It's like played for laughs that it's like, okay, Violet's having teenage girl issues. Dash is having problems with math. Like, it's funny to watch Bob juggle this, but it's like, yeah, but like the draw of The Incredibles is that it's The Incredibles, right? Like it's a family of superheroes. So it's like, what are all of them doing? Like, how are they all dealing with this when...
How are they all dealing with it together? Like, it was so undermined.
Nice.
Yeah.
And like to that point, like not even like slightly veering off too. Like that was one of my issues in like even the fight scenes is they didn't work together enough. Like that's one thing I loved about the end against Syndrome in the first one is like how much they use their powers in conjunction to do things. And this one, like everyone like emotionally and physically and storyline wise were just so separated from each other where it's like it's meant to be a movie about a family.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's also like something to be said about how, it's interesting for like, for instance, to see Bob handle this stuff, but it's also like, if Helen has always been the one with the kids, how do the kids feel when suddenly she's gone? I feel like there has to be also like some sort of like, oh, she's not here anymore. Oh, this is what it means. Like, oh, my mom actually is like crazy, incredible, and amazing. And I didn't realize this. Like, there's storylines that could have done something that kept the family dynamics going. That is definitely something I mentioned in the previous one where it was like, I felt the family element of the film was missing. There was just, everything was too disjointed. Helen was going through her stuff. Bob was going through his stuff, and then the kids were going through their own things, and none of these things were echoing on each other. Yeah. It was just there was no like weaving of these actions and these there was no repercussions to anything they all did. It was just kind of like, yes, we're all kind of dealing with our own stuff, and we're all trying to solve it all, but like family, and I just didn't feel
there was no family. Like it would have been great if like whenever Violet like got stood up, if it wasn't just so much Bob was like trying to make her feel better, but like Dash was trying to help too. Or like on the opposite end of that, like if, while trying to do the homework, well, wouldn't Violet know how to do the new math? Right. So like, why aren't
those two bonding? Yeah.
Yeah. Like, why aren't we getting any of that? It was very much like, here's Bob dealing with Dash. Here's Bob dealing with Violet. Here's Bob dealing with Jack. Like, and then like, they're just often, each of those kids is often its own kind of world. Like Jack's fighting raccoons, like Violet's dealing with boys.
Right.
Like, Dash is fighting math. Like, so
yeah.
It just would have been nice to see them sort of like interlaced because I guess they're trying to sell us on this family theme, but there wasn't a family theme, like, or even if it was like, okay, your mom's gone, we have to come together. Like there was none of that. So I don't know. It's just.
Yeah. I don't know. I just also, speaking of Jack, one, because here's the thing, like, look, one, he took a lot of Dash's time, I think. They replaced Dash with Jack, whereas, like, I think if we actually, like, time it, Dash's time is probably the same as Jack's in the first movie, and Jack's time now is the same as Dash's in the first movie. if that makes sense. They've switched it. And I don't know, I just think that they gave, like, look, it was hilarious, everything Jack did. Like, I thought it was all funny, it was entertaining, but I personally, like, I don't, maybe if there was, like, more interactions.
Maybe they did
like,
something with it.
Yeah, I think maybe if there was, like, I don't know, like, what happens if, like, I don't know, like, Dash is part of the school play, and the dad goes with Jack, but then Jack is loose in the school, and then Violet has to run around trying to find Jack and make sure no one finds out, or something crazy like that. Like, it could have been, like, something like that would happen, and then suddenly it's like, oh, this is, like, what's happening while Helen's saving the world. These guys are struggling to deal with, like, a baby that's, like, super OP. That's just super powerful and just, like, is... Like, it's just a lot. And, you know, and I feel like had that been happening, had we seen more things, and I don't know, I just felt like they were also very confined. It was just all in this one house. Whereas before we went to an island, we were on a plane, we were here, we were there with the kids. With the kids, we were really just in one place, I think, for most of the movie. And I think that impacted their storylines in a negative way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, speaking of Jack, like, one, are his powers, like, ridiculous. Two, his scene with Edna, because that was, I think, a highlight.
Yeah.
And, three, that raccoon scene. I love it, but did it go on for too long?
It did go on for a really long time.
It really did.
Like, shouldn't have, like, thematically shouldn't have hit it. Shouldn't it have just been, like, a short... Like, couldn't that, or something, like, done something like...
Just seen a couple seconds of it and then, like, see it in the background as Bob's slowly waking up.
Right! Yeah, that could have been, like, I don't know, I just feel like it felt out of place with the movie in terms of tone.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it's, like, that token scene, right, that they have to do for the kids. The little...
I guess, but there was a lot of, I guess, other kind of, like, humor and stuff like that throughout the movie that they...
Yeah, I guess I just imagine that being like someone being like, no, we have to keep that in because this we showed some shot in the first 10 minutes, so like we need to have this. So the like you brought up Edna in the scene with Jack, like that's what I was referring to in the beginning, is that Edna says, "Oh, your son's a polymorph." Like, so he's got all these powers, and I was like, okay, so like is that, you know, and people were saying on the internet, they're like, okay, like, is that it? Like, is his powers that he is like a polymorph and can absorb powers, or like is he just not there yet? Like, you know, because they don't make any mention of this happening to their other kids, right? Like they act like this is
right.
Like this is totally new.
So it's like, okay, like is it just that he's like a limitless baby who hasn't like settled on a thing yet, or is like this his powers that like he can just do like he just absorbs powers? But
like, because isn't a polymorph... Okay, so I could understand if he was, like, a polymorph in the sense of, like, okay, he can turn into, like in the first movie. He turns into stone, he turns into, metal? Like, fire, or metal. Yeah, it was metal. So, like, that's, like, I guess transforming himself, like, into sort of different kind of, like, states makes sense if he's a polymorph, but it's the fact that he can do other things, like... go into other dimensions or like I guess shoot laser beams. Like that doesn't necessarily, unless I have a super like wrong version of what a polymorph is. But even then, like whenever Bob's talking to Helen and she's like, I missed his first power, and he's like, oh, you missed his first 17. And I was like, no, his power would then be he's a polymorph. Like, so is he a polymorph or does he have 17 different powers? Which one is it?
If you Google Incredibles, the first 5 things that pop up are articles, people being like, okay, like what's going on with Jack? People did not get it. I didn't get it.
I don't know. For me, I just felt like it came to a point where they just gave Jack powers just so they can tell the story easier. Like, we need to find a way to get from point B to point C. Oh, give Jack this power so then it'll be easy and then whatever. I feel like that's how it got to that point. Like, I don't mind Jack having multiple powers. But the moment he, like, became giant Jack, I was like, where did that come from? And I guess that's part of the joke, but I'm like, really? Like, that's the solution into, like, how you get from here to there? Like, you couldn't just find a creative way to get from here to there? I don't know. I'm a strong fan of limits. I like limits because it makes you more creative in how you find solutions within those limits. And with Jack Jack's entire existence is limitless potential, and it just bugs the heck out of me.
Yeah. There was like no stopping point. Like it would have been like, I think, better if it would have been like 5 or 6, maybe 7, but like 17's a lot. And then for them to continue on even after that, like, because if it's at 17 and like Bob didn't even know that he could turn into like a big, huge person, then wouldn't that be more? So where does it end? What's the stopping point? Because
Incredibles 3 is that Jack has subjugated the entire Earth because
he couldn't get a cookie.
Because he wants a cookie, exactly. That's exactly it. We talked about Violet, we talked about Dash and Jack. What about Frozone? I think he's part of the family, and I wanted more from him, but at the same time, I'm like, no, I got the right amount. And then, but what really like hurt, what really just like it just was a gut punch. We don't see Honey. We just get a rehash. We get a rehash of the joke of the iconic "Where's my super suit" line, and it's like, no, you want to actually evolve? Show us Honey. Don't just do the same joke again.
The sad part is I think they were supposed to have Honey. I feel like she got cut out, which makes me even more upset.
Yeah. And it's like you rehashed the same joke and you did it kind of super weak. Showed us in the trailer. So it's like, all right, that's it.
That was it. Done. Wiped our hands of this.
Yeah,
it was very like unsatisfying, because if you're gonna like do the joke again, like you have to expand upon it at least a little bit, but you didn't even do that. Like you cut it short. It was just like, I have to go, and it's like, you have to go, you better leave that suit, and that was it. And I was like, oh, okay, we don't even get more of that. Like, I guess this is it.
Also, who is Honey? Why does she know? Like, what is she super? Like, who? Justice for Honey, like.
Yes. Justice for Honey. Yeah. Does Honey have superpowers? Like, what does Honey do for during the day? Like, yeah, like, does she have a job? Like, what is her like profession? I want to know more about her. Can we have Incredibles 3 with just Honey and Dash? Like,
Basically, the spin-off, Honey and Dash.
Honey and
Dash.
That
could be like, I don't know. I think that could work. That could totally work.
Oh, and what happened to Mirage? Like, where did she go?
Well, I mean, the thing with Mirage is that her voice actress passed away. So I already knew that she wasn't going to be in it. But, I mean, they could have, like, done a nod or something. They definitely could have, like, shown
Mirage was such kind of a little bit of a breakout character in the first.
Yeah.
Yes. Which is why it's even more upsetting.
Nobody even mentioned her.
Nope. Even just a mention would have been nice. But there was, like, none of that. It was another thing where they were just like, she was in the first movie, her voice actress died. Wipe our hands of this. Like, goodbye.
Yeah.
There was also a rumor on the internet leading up to this. People were saying that Lady Gaga had gotten cast to, like, continuing to voice Mirage. And I was like, nobody's substantiating this. And it's making me sad.
Why not?
Can this be real?
Yeah.
Oh, now you put it in my head. I know, and now I want it.
Yeah, see, that was me for months.
Oh,
that would have been
people
beautiful.
On the internet made me believe that this was a possibility, but nothing ever came of it. So,
that would be so pretty.
Big old
amazing.
bummer.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, we got the movie we got. We like the movie we got. But yeah. Let's talk about this kind of final act then. Since we've gone through, like, the main two plots, kind of talked about them. So, this is, like, when both plots come together. The adults get mind controlled, and the kids now have to save them. Mm-hmm. Then they very quickly they do. And then they try and stop Evelyn from escaping, as well as stop a runaway ship, which is very similar to the runaway train that Elastigirl stopped. I don't know. I just feel like there's a lot of runaway vehicles in this movie. Like, one too many, I feel. It's always like something is running away that they have to stop. I don't know.
Look, it's the 60s. They don't have a grasp on transportation, so everything is just getting away from
everything's
them.
Scary.
Of course, everything's new and scary, of course. But But yeah, one thing that we haven't really talked about is these henchmen. So like Void and the other henchmen. What did you think of Void?
She was, for a second, I was listening to her voice and I was like, why do you sound a little bit like America Ferrera? It wasn't, but she sounded, it sounded a bit like it to me. And then I like looked it up. I was like, oh yeah, no, that makes sense now. I liked Void. I thought she was funny. It's, you know, another one of those things. I was like, oh, it was nice to see. It's like, oh, like, I mean, you're a huge fan, but she's also a super herself. Like that. Yeah. Makes sense.
That was sweet.
Yeah, like that it's like others, like that it's like supers who are like looking up to other supers as opposed to just this random, you know, another buddy situation.
Right.
So I like Void. And her power is insane.
Yeah, her power is cool and super helpful. Like,
yeah.
Why couldn't you just like make a Void big enough for the ship? Is my question.
Yeah, like why aren't you just voiding the ship to like the middle?
To like go the other way.
She needs to practice. She's been in hiding.
Or why aren't you just making a void into like where she's steering the ship into the control? Like why couldn't why couldn't you void Bob into the engine room? Like once you get through,
yes.
Like her powers also bring up a lot of plot holes.
Or not just like why couldn't you just instead of like throw it like voiding Helen into hitting the plane so many times? Why couldn't you just void her into the plane? Or why couldn't you just void the plane from getting away and make it go in circles or something? Like I don't know. It's a great power. It's visually incredible to look at, but it's also like just like. There are a lot of voids.
It was underutilized.
Yeah.
Either it was underutilized or like.
And like in that sense, like I would say to myself, I'm like, okay, like clearly her powers make it difficult for us to explain why suddenly the plot is like she makes it difficult for us to make the plot difficult because it's like, oh, why can't she just do this? So I would have kept her as a henchman, right? Like I would have just not had, because then that nullifies all of it. So it's like, oh, she's not doing that because she's a henchman right now, and we don't have to worry about people being like, so wait, why didn't she just like move the whole ship?
Right. What do you guys think of the whole mind control element? I feel like it
was so unexplained, and what is it? Because I was thinking about this, especially when I was watching it the second time. I was like, wait, so like. They have to be told what to do. And what is it? Evelyn was saying how like, oh, well, that pizza boy gave up a good fight. I mean, I gave up a good fight through him. And I was like, okay, so were you like...
Was this like a video game?
Yeah, I was like, so like, were you there in that moment? Because then how do you control multiple people at once? Like, how are you controlling all of like the henchmen at the same time? Are you like having to like move them along like move them by each move, or is it like one of those like your goal is to do this, I'll check back in with you later, like like what
and press play.
Yeah, go, like you're free. Like how I just didn't understand that, like the whole like the mind control aspect of it, because I guess it would make sense if she couldn't like because that would have been interesting to explore too, is if she couldn't utilize too many at once. So then that maybe like she's like okay, I have to shut down like
the owl guy.
The owl guy, so that I can then use like the crusher, but like okay, I don't need the crusher at this moment, so then like let me shut him down and let me go get Elastigirl. Like what are the mechanics behind the mind control sort of thing? I wanted to know. Like, I really just wanted to know how she was doing it. Because was she using purely speakers? Like, what is it? I like that you guys are just letting me talk myself.
Yeah, no, I was going to let that go for as long as it was going to go.
Because, I mean, I was, because, you know, sometimes, I don't know. I was curious to see like where like you take like the technology stuff, because I don't know. I'm so like techno engineering unsophisticated. I don't know what I just said, but that's what I am. And so that's why I'm like, you know, yeah. So that's why I was like, oh, well, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, there's a lot of questions involved with like the mind control stuff. But I don't know. I'm kind of like, I don't know. I just feel, I don't know if, like, I'm glad that it didn't last long, but I'm also a little sad that we didn't get more of, like, Bob versus Helen and the kids versus the parents. Like, I kind of wanted more of that. I mean, if you're going to do that, give me more of it. Like, give me more of, like, a sequence. Give me more of that elaborateness, if that's what's gonna happen. And there could be, like, there could be a lot of drama in there. What if, like, it's the kids versus, like, their parents, and suddenly the parents, like, almost hit them and hurt them, and it's like, that's drama, and they don't really do that.
That's drama.
You know, that's like the
scarring, like years of therapy.
That's like, but not just that, but like that is like a very emotional, like, moment for a family. You know, like, how do you deal with that type of stuff and, like, the consequences of that, and having to understand, like, it's not them, like, they're being controlled or whatever. I don't know. I just feel like there could have been something really interesting there, and I feel like I'm saying that a lot, but
because it was like there could have been so many, like, other ways to go about it, and even, like, with the kids fighting their parents, like, imagine, like, how did the kids get to the point where they're like, we have to go save our parents? It was literally like a switch flipped, and they were like, okay, this is what we're gonna go do. But then, like, they never even considered the possibility of them, like, having to fight their parents, or because they didn't even do that, really. I mean, like, Jack just went to his mom and was like, Mom, no, take your sunglasses off. Like, I'm going to break them. So it was so, like, I would have loved to have seen that. Like, them sort of fighting, like, the parents more. Even, like, them fighting the henchmen I felt like it was very soft. It wasn't as, like, hard as it could have been, especially compared to the first movie where, like, they even, like, talk about the legitimate threat of death. Like, these people want to hurt you. These people don't even want to just hurt you. They want to kill you. And it's like, okay, these people have more of a potential to kill you. Like,
yeah. I mean, there's something interesting with what you said in terms of, like, there's this moment in the opening sequence where this, like, the Underminers, like, tractor runs over Bob, and he's not Elastigirl. He would have been splattered.
Yeah,
but he manages to survive.
By that.
And
is
that
he
was, like,
made
the
of
first
stone?
Right. I'm like, he has super strength, but that doesn't mean he can't bleed, referencing Batman v Superman. Do you bleed? Well, clearly he doesn't, and it's like, that doesn't make sense, though.
Also doesn't make sense, too, because in the first movie,
he does.
Bob actually gets hurt.
Yeah.
So how was it just like the tractor or the wheel was just, like, made out of Jello, but then he still can't, like, stop? I don't understand that. It's like you undid what you did in the first movie, almost.
Right. Can I give you guys a reading of something? Because you guys reminded me of it while talking about this. When I was watching the movie, and this is really, like, I'm reaching. I am, like, spreading myself thin with this reading, but, like, I'm aware of it.
Toast.
Like, but I'm aware of it. So just letting, like, listeners, like, I'm aware that this is, like, very, like, thin logic. But I kind of was, like, pretty, like, annoyed by the fact that the way that the kids get to the ship and try and solve this issue that wouldn't have happened if their mom hadn't gone off and joined the workforce is by grabbing their dad's car of his, like, golden age, which is, like, and a car is such a masculine representation of all these things that we dealt with in the first movie. So it's, like, linking that as the vehicle, pun intended, to, like, link back the family together and solve this issue. Like, it's not, like, again, very thin argument, and the mom, like, by the end, they're like, Mom, you gotta deal with the villain, because she's your villain. So it's like, she still manages to go off and do her thing, but at the same time, I'm like, why, like, just visually, there's a metaphor in there somewhere that I don't like.
Yeah.
Personally. But,
yeah. It's thin, but I can see it.
Yeah. Like, as I was, like, taking notes, I was like, I started writing that, but then I was like, nah, I'm being too hard. That's too much. Like, that's too, like, my brain's working too hard for this. Well, like, this is not worth it. But I
think it's, like, them sort of trying to connect the whole nostalgia thing, too, because, what is it? Whenever they first go meet Winston, Frozon's like, oh yeah, wear the old suits because I feel like this guy's nostalgic.
Likes nostalgia.
Yeah. And so I feel like they were still trying to kind of make that connection. They were like, look, we can incorporate like the things from the past to get them to the future of joining their parents on the ship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Winston should have like had the car. Like if he's rich enough, like he like if he's nostalgic and a super fan of superheroes, then he should have owned the car. If not him, then like theory. Syndrome was the one who owned the car, but then he got, he died, so they auctioned it off to the other guy.
My theory was that the house that they were staying in was Syndrome's.
Oh my god! Well, no, that's owned by Winston.
But Winston said that he bought it from this this tycoon or whoever who wanted a lot of like secret exits and things like that. And I was like,
really?
That never mission either.
Well, again, I've seen the movie twice, but I remember hearing that the second time, and I was like, "This is Syndrome's house.
That's totally Syndrome's house."
And it was like super high techy, and then it had the orange and the white combination, and then like the waterfall from the ceiling. I was like, "Ooh, Syndrome, this is your home." Like,
and like it makes sense that like the car knew where Syndrome's house was because he owned the car, and then they auctioned it off. It all is starting to fall into place, guys. Like this is a very strong theory.
This is April's theory of the movie. Like, the house belonged to Syndrome.
Remnants of Syndrome. That's the name of the theory. But yeah, I think we're good. I kind of want to now move on and talk about the animated short that preceded this movie because I adore it.
Like what?
Okay,
that short took though.
I know. But before we get into that, is there any kind of like final thoughts on The Incredibles 2? Any last minute things?
Only final thought, if I was going to sum up everything that kind of bugged me about this movie, is that it wasn't that it did anything bad. It just had so much unrealized potential.
Yes. 100% agree with that. Signing off on that.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So let's talk about this beautiful short that, for me, that was the gem of the night. Like, I enjoyed The Incredibles 2. I had fun with it. But what I left the theater, like, in awe of, what I left the theater being like, oh my god, I want more of this, it's the animated short Bow, which was directed by a woman, just letting people know that. But yeah, so what did you guys think about? I had even forgotten that we were going to get an
I know. As soon as it happened, I was like, oh, right, this is, yeah.
I forgot until it started.
Well, my first thing with it was that it's Toronto. It's my place. I was like, oh my god, this takes place in Toronto. This is so great. Like when they went to when she went to get vegetables and stuff, I was like, oh my god, she's on Spadina. Like I know that place. I've been there. And then when she's like in the streetcar, I was like, oh my god, she's in the streetcar. Things terrible.
Things terrible.
The first takeaway was like, oh man, my home, and stuff. But that was like such a in your face amount of emotions at once, because I was like, that thing's so cute and I want them to be happy forever, and then I was like, oh, he's growing up, and then she ate him.
How did your audiences react, by the way, to that? I'm curious.
God, everyone was nuts. Everyone was like, yo.
Okay, but like nervous laughter or like just ghastly, like, oh my god.
Not like everyone was like, oh my god, because at that point we were into it, right? Like we were like, okay, this is, and then she ate him and everyone was like, oh my god.
The first crowd, they had that like, oh my gosh, like that just happened moment. But then the second crowd thought it was hilarious. And I was like, what? No!
That's what I was looking for. Because I think, I don't remember if it was Alex or Dylan's like audience. They were like in hysterics. And I'm just like, no, it was so dark.
Yeah, no, the first audience was on par with me, and even though they were all terrible, but they had the same reaction did. But I was like, oh no, like why would you do that? But the second audience thought it was hilarious, and I was not okay with it. I was like, you guys are all monsters. Get out of this theater. You don't deserve this.
But yeah, like for me, that was I mentioned that's like the highlight of the night, and this has happened before for me where I will go to a Pixar movie I think the only one that, I think in recent memory, the one where this hasn't happened, it's in Coco. In Coco, that was the only one where the short didn't outdo the feature. But in this one, I was like, that to me is like what I paid to see. Like, even despite waiting 14 years for The Incredibles 2, I was like, that's my emotional connection to a story. That's my, like, it was like Pixar in like 3 to 5 minutes. And it was like beautiful.
Yeah. No, I liked it a lot.
I liked it a lot too. Yeah. And I think the other reason that like helped, I guess, me like it even more was the fact that what is it? Because the short in front of Coco was so terrible that wasn't short. And so
that was the Frozen one, right? I never saw Coco in theaters.
Yeah.
So.
Oh my gosh, you're so lucky because it was like 30 minutes.
It was like, it was long.
It was really, really long.
And it was like 30-minute trailers and 30-minute short. It was a lot.
I was so mad for the Frozen one. Like, as soon as it started, I immediately was like, okay, at least I only have to sit through this for like 5 minutes. And then it just kept going on and on and on. And like at one point I like asked my husband, I was like, I'm going to go out of this theater. So can you just like I was like, I know we're not supposed to be on phones, but can you just like, I don't know, like somehow figure out to tell me to come back in because I can't take any more of this. Like, I'm going to die. But this one was like, so like, it was like the shorts that I love to see. And so it was very refreshing, especially after that jarring experience with Coco. But it's just super nice. And like, it's sweet and it touched my heart. And that's what I love about the shorts is whenever they do like nice things like that, even if I was like horrified that she ate the
dumpling son.
Yeah, the dumpling son.
Yeah, I mean, I will say also, I really appreciate that the people look different. They don't have one mold for a human female. They don't have one mold that looks exactly the same. I mean, if anyone has seen the Wreck-It Ralph trailer, the women have one mold. They all have the same body type. They just have different variety of like colors and shades and whatever. But it's the same body type. And in this movie, we don't get that. I'm not in this movie. In this short, we don't get that. Even also in The Incredibles, we get multiple body types for men and women, you know? So one thing that I really appreciate from this movie is that, from this short, is that it looked different. It was a different type of character design than what we're used to in these kind of 3D renders of characters. So, really appreciate it. Thank you.
And it also shows, I guess, kind of like a dedication to the work kind of thing, because I feel like it's, like in animation especially, it just comes off kind of lazy whenever like all the characters kind of like are the same, I guess, mold. And for them to have so many different like shapes and sizes and everything like that, like it's just really, I guess, nice. And it shows that they put like a lot of effort into what they're producing.
Yeah, totally.
All
right, so I guess that does it for us. I was gonna do like a reference to Finding Dory, but now I'm self-conscious about it.
I'm sorry.
I haven't seen Finding Dory, so it would have been lost on me. So.
No, I don't know. I just found it interesting because like Finding Dory I feel is a great movie, but because Finding Nemo exists, it's like it's weighed down because suddenly now the novelty of it is gone because we already had Finding Nemo. Even if sometimes Finding Dory is like stronger than Finding Nemo, because Finding Nemo exists, Finding Dory is weighed down.
Yeah.
Whereas with The Incredibles 2, I didn't feel that way.
Yeah.
I felt it was much more of like it didn't necessarily.
And because it was a continuation, right? Like it was a straight up takes probably seconds after the last one ended. So
right. Exactly. So, and I, if anything, the thing with The Incredibles 2, like the impact of the first Incredibles didn't negatively impact the second Incredibles in any way. If anything, any faults that The Incredibles 2 had were of its own creation. Yeah. Whereas with Finding Dory, some of that had to do with Finding Nemo.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense. So that's kind of my final thoughts on The Incredibles 2. Any final thoughts from you guys? Any last things before we finish up?
No,
I was going to say, I just want everyone to know that I actually really do love this movie.
Yes. Disclaimer at the end of the podcast.
It is because we love it that we pick it apart so much.
Exactly. It's just like, what is it? The Miraculous Ladybug podcast. Like, I just sit there and hate on it the entire time, but I really love it. Like, so.
They all know. All our listeners know that we really enjoyed The Incredibles 2, and it was worth the wait. And it's so pretty to look at. Like, I can't emphasize this enough. It is so pretty to look at. Like, they really knocked it out of the park.
The biggest thing too is, and I was really happy. So, because the second time I saw it, I already said it was at the Draft House, and I thought it was great that they put together this kind of like what happened previously. Like they did it themselves.
No way!
Yeah, and so like. Seeing it like side by side was just so like I really appreciated that because like you could see where they made the improvements. Like one noticeable one was with Helen's like hairline because like if you go back and like look at her hairline, it's kind of like very like strandy. Like you could tell it's very sort of, I want to use the word blocky for hair.
This was before the age of Merida when they had to invent that new software.
Exactly. So, but I mean, the hair is still impressive in the first one, but like seeing like it next to each other it was astounding because again, like I said, it was so amazing and incredible, but you didn't lose the feel of the first movie. Like it still felt like Incredible 1, but like a better looking version of it, if that makes sense. So,
yeah.
And my thing's always hair and water. So the hair looked good, the water looked even better. So
Yep. Again, guys at Pixar, please give like I think there would be a lot of people who would pay you to make like a revamped animation of The Incredibles. It's not going to happen because you'd essentially have to make a movie over again. You don't have the resources. I understand that. But also do it. Just do it for me. Just do it. But yeah, that does it for this podcast. Find out all the info on this podcast at overlyanimated.com. You can join us on Discord to text chat about animation at overlyanimated.com/Discord. You can support us via Patreon at patreon.com/overlyanimated. Thanks to all our current patrons, especially our patron of the podcast, Alec, aka Frozone, and that was a very intentional selection of patron. And thanks as always to our Patreon executive producers, John, Ryan, Steve, Alex, Andy, and Hugh. Thanks for listening, guys. If you want to hear more thoughts on The Incredibles, you can watch our retrospective of The Incredibles, which was done in 2015, 2016.
Yeah, I think it was Dylan and I.
And then you could do the second retrospective on The Incredibles that was released this past week or 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. You can listen to our React podcast on The Incredibles 2, which was released on Thursday. And also you can listen to this over again, because why wouldn't you want to listen to us talk over again? So yeah, thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.